As Mike said, we're really honored to have Matt Lohr be with us today, and he served as our 16th chief of the USDA's Natural Resource Conservation Service. He's also a farm kid on a Century family farm in Virginia and a fifth-generation farmer. He served as Commissioner of Agriculture and Consumer Services. He's also been a Virginia House of Delegates individual, real-life state legislator. He has also been involved with the Knowledge Center Director for Farm Credit for Virginia, and he also manages his own motivation speaking business, Lohr Leadership, and can be available, as Randy can be, for doing numerous trainings and sessions and public speaking out across the nation. Couldn't be more excited to have Matt with us today. Going to switch over the control to you, Matt, coming to you right now, and you should be able to go ahead and start your presentation. Matt Lohr, folks, give him a round of applause, even though the only person to hear it will be you.
There you go. There you go. Well, thank you so much, Ray. Good morning, everyone. What a pleasure and an honor it is to be able to participate and spend some time with you here this morning. As he said, the cattle are fed and the chickens are checked, so I'm ready to have some fun. Really just to have a session where we can learn and be able to share a little bit. First of all, I want to thank Mike and Ray for this wonderful invitation to be a part of this. And certainly it's been nice to reconnect with Randy again after many years, and an honor for me to share this platform with him. I love listening to great speakers and learning. And so I've got my paper and pencil ready for you, Randy. When you get to speak, I want to take some notes as well. But I absolutely love being able to do these types of speaking trainings. I've been doing them for probably 25 years, but I have to say this is the first one that I've ever done virtually. I think Randy would probably agree. I love being able to be on stage and to engage and interact with the audience and the crowd and make these as interactive as possible. Unfortunately, we're not able to do that. So I'm a little nervous of how I can come across, and hopefully you'll still be able to to benefit from this, and it can be helpful. So I'm going to jump right in and again say thank you for taking your time today to invest in yourself, and I'm looking forward to being able to share. Now, if you're someone that is scared of speaking, or you think that maybe you're not going to be able to be effective, then I want to say you've come to the right place. Because I can share personally for me, and it seems like it was yesterday, I am not someone who grew up loving the stage and loving to be in front of people. I remember being a fifth grader, and my teacher came to me and encouraged me to run for an SCA office. And she had me interested right up until the fact that she said I had to give a speech in front of the entire school. And I'm like, absolutely not. There's no way in the world that you're going to get Matt Lohr on the stage speaking to anyone. And that fear of speaking really stayed with me all the way to high school. You see on the slide there that me in the FFA jacket, for maybe many of you on the video today, you got started with 4-H or FFA. And for me, I had an ag teacher, Mr. Hively, who just took me under his wing and pushed me and encouraged me. And my freshman year in high school, I participated in my first FFA speaking contest reluctantly. And I'm here to say, my friends, that I placed dead last in that chapter contest, and I'll never forget it. But I came in dead last, really discouraged, and my advisor came up to me and told me how proud he was. And that encouraged me. You know, it was the first step, right? Anytime you do something, you've got to try it for the first time. I failed miserably and didn't even like it, but he wouldn't let me quit. And I can tell you, throughout all 4 years of high school, he was right there encouraging me. And I didn't win a speaking contest until my senior year in high school. I tell you, I took a lot of work to get me where I am today. So I share all of that with you to say that if you're someone who is scared, you know, they say speaking is like the #1 fear of all of society. If it's something you think you want to do, but you just are having some doubts about your personal abilities, you've come to the right place. Because I know Randy would agree, you know, practice is what makes us all better speakers. And taking that first step, hopefully we can share with you some great tips today, but being able to incorporate that and really just practice is how all of us can get better. So hopefully that can be a little bit of encouragement for you today. Just a little bit quick on my background. As Ray said, was very fortunate after college. I was an ag teacher for a couple of years, and then went back home to the family farm, got involved in local politics, and served in the state legislature and served as the Commissioner of Agriculture for the state of Virginia. Along that time too, back I guess probably in the mid-90s, shortly after graduating from college, I had a chance with my late wife, Andrea, to form our own motivational speaking business, Lohr Leadership. Started out very small, and I remember in the early days, if somebody would feed me dinner and give me $10, I'd be happy to come and speak to groups all across the state and all across the country. And over time, that's developed primarily for those agriculture and educational groups. But it's something that I've always enjoyed. For what connects me here to NASCA and all of you today, certainly was the opportunity that I had back in 2018 to serve as the chief of NRCS. Wonderful opportunity for those 2 years to really work hand in hand with our farmers, our partners, to help folks understand the importance of conservation. And certainly thank you for the role that NASCA plays, working hand in hand with NRCS for us to accomplish that mission. Just about a month ago, I stepped down. My farm manager had retired and moved away. And my wife, who had been a single mom for the last 2 years, raising our 6 kids, decided, it really was time for me to come back home to the farm. And so for the last 4 weeks, I've been back here in the Shenandoah Valley. My days are very different now. I have to say my commute is much better. Instead of driving 2 hours into Washington, I hop on the four-wheeler and ride down over the hill. But very, very excited to be in this position today, and still hopefully once life gets back to normal, I'll be able to get out there again across the country and be able to speak and share groups. But I guess the point of all that is no matter what job that I've had in my lifetime, and I've been very blessed to work in a whole assortment of areas, really the ability to speak, the ability to communicate, the ability to motivate and inspire, to me has taught me is what makes people successful. You don't have to be the smartest person in the room, but you have to be able to really connect and influence and motivate and inspire people. And those are the folks that really are able to get the most effective results in life. And so I'm really excited to have some time with you today, just to be able to share a little bit about, in my experience over the last 25 years, what I've learned that I can hopefully share with you to help you grow in your ability to communicate and to be more successful. Real quick overview in the time that I have together. I want to start off a little bit by helping you to really identify the audience that you're going to be speaking to and really what is the purpose. Most of what happens before a speaker gets on stage is done before they ever get there. It's the preparation, it's the background work that they do to make sure they understand the group, they understand what the expectation is. It's that work that goes into it before you ever get on stage. So I want to spend a little time with you, giving you some tips to kind of work through the very early stages, and then talk about what makes a presentation effective, the actual presentation pieces, kind of keys for a successful delivery, and then how you can take all of that and go forward. Before we jump in here, I want to take just 30 seconds. I want to give you an opportunity to think, and I think as Ray said, you have some paper and pencil hopefully in front of you, but take just about 30 seconds and think about one of the greatest speeches you've ever heard, or maybe one of the greatest speakers you've ever heard, and just jot some of those things down. What made that presentation so impactful for you? What was it about it that made it memorable? So jot down just a couple of things right now, one of the best speakers you've ever heard or one of the best speeches you've ever heard, and what made it so effective. Now, this is where I normally have a box of candy, and I toss out to the audience when they're able to share. I know we can't do that now, but hopefully as you think about that, you've been able to think about some presentations or some speakers that made you laugh. They really they gave you hope and inspiration. They connected with you. They touched you in some way, and you left that presentation motivated and inspired to go out and really do something, accept some kind of challenge. And I have to say, 23 years ago, I had a chance to hear Randy at a Virginia Farm Bureau luncheon speech, and I still remember. I remember hearing his speech. I remember some of his stories, and so that was 23 years ago, and I still remember him. The great speakers that we hear, you may not remember every single thing about them, but there are nuggets that you take away that stick with you really for a lifetime. And that's really the goal today, is to kind of help you think about who were those who are those speakers and some of those speeches that have really impacted you, and what was it about those presentations that made such a difference? These are things we can kind of incorporate into what we do. Now, I want to give you 30 more seconds to think about maybe the worst speech you've ever heard, maybe a worst presenter you've ever heard. What was it about that presentation that was memorable, but maybe not for the way that they probably wanted it to be remembered for? So take just a second and think about some of those characteristics of a really poor presentation that you've heard. Now, if you're like me, you've probably heard your share of speeches, and I can think back to being a college student and some of my college professors and some of their lectures, but I'm guessing probably pretty boring, right? Maybe very monotone, just didn't excite you, probably a lack of engagement, lack of stories, just missed the audience. I'm guessing too, some speakers, and I know one of the questions that was submitted was, how do you eliminate some of those ums and you knows and some of those padding words? It can be a game sometimes when you have a presenter that's just every other word is an and you kind of start writing down the number and tapping the desk every time they do it. You know, those are not the things you want to be remembered for. Maybe somebody that had no eye contact and just stared straight ahead or stared at the floor. We all have had those experiences where we've heard speakers that really missed the mark. And so again, the goal today is to kind of give you some tips to help you not have one of those types of memorable presentations, but kind of get you moving in the right direction. What I want to give you right now, and I hope that this is something that you can print off at some point and keep it handy. To me, I use something very similar to this every time that I'm asked to give a presentation, because as I said, your success in a presentation comes down to being prepared. And so much of the work takes place before you ever even get to the event that you're going to be speaking to. You could be the best speaker in the world, but if you're not prepared or you're not giving the appropriate presentation, it will not be successful. So whenever you have an opportunity to give a speech, I would encourage you to kind of work through some of these things. Certainly, when is it and where is it? You can have the best presentation in the world, but if you show up on the wrong day at the wrong place, I promise you, it's not going to be successful. And we've probably all had that experience happen before, but make sure you know where it is and when it is. Who is the group you're going to be speaking to? Make sure that your speech is geared towards the appropriate audience. Is it adults? Is it kids? You know, make sure you know who the group is going to be. How many? It's very important to know about how many are going to be there. What is the room setup like? I can tell you, if I'm speaking in a theater style seating where there's 500 people that are sitting in chairs, I will approach that presentation differently than a group that's going to be sitting at a table. So you want to make sure you know what the room setup is, how long of a presentation are they looking for. There's nothing worse than thinking you're going to be speaking for 15 minutes and you show up and they've got you slated for 2 hours on the program, or vice versa. Really, what is the information that they want to hear? Is it a speech or is it more of an interactive workshop? Can you use PowerPoint or other audio visuals? And finally, what is the purpose? Are you there to educate them on a particular topic, inform them? Some groups really want someone to come in and just entertain them for 30 minutes or motivate them to accept some challenge that that group is facing. If you can ask these questions, and I can promise you before any presentation, I work through this to know, be prepared is one of the most important things that you can do before any type of presentation. And hopefully this checklist will give you an opportunity to work through some of those questions. Now, I want to real quick too work you through a little bit about what makes an actual speech great. So just fleshing out the actual preparation of putting a presentation together. Now, this is going to seem pretty simple and pretty obvious, but really successful presentations come down to the very basics, right? You got to have the opening, the body, and the conclusion are going to be extremely important. Now, I have to say, every person's different in how they put this together. I'm the kind of guy that I like just rough outlines. I don't like to read a speech. I don't really want to memorize something. I just kind of make an outline and then kind of commit that outline to memory and speak on the cuff. I could give the same speech 3 different days in a row, and it probably would be very different each time because I don't write the speech out word for word. My late wife, Andrea, who was one of the best speakers that I've ever heard, was completely the opposite. She would write out her speech word for word in her old spiral notebook, commit it to memory, get up on stage and just blow an audience out of the water. And she would give that speech 3 days in a row, and it would be the same speech word for word. That's what worked best for her. Every person is different. So I would encourage you, depending on what kind of presenter you are, to really figure that out. There's no right or wrong answer. If you want to put an outline together or you want to write it out word for word and memorize it, they both can be very effective. But again, every person has their own style. So for me, when you're kicking off a presentation, that opening is so extremely important because you have just a few short minutes to really connect with that audience, right? Your first 30 seconds on stage are crucial. You have to show energy. You have to show passion. You have to smile. Those are things that I think are so very, very important. As soon as you get them in front of that group, showing that energy that you're happy to be there. And why would we expect them to be happy to be there if you have zero enthusiasm or energy? So for me, what I recommend, as soon as somebody introduces you, you get on stage there and thank them for the invitation, thank them for the introduction, a little brief introduction about yourself, again, with a smile, with energy and excitement. And I recommend looking for a way to really have that opening connection with your crowd. Now, my style is humor. I love humor. It's not everyone's style, and I've heard a lot of great presenters that don't use humor. But I think if you can have some type of humorous interaction with them to kind of put them at ease, I think it really just sets the tone. It relaxes me as a speaker. It kind of puts the audience at ease. And an example, and if you've heard me speak before, you've probably heard me tell this anecdote. I would thank Ray for inviting me to be with you today and say, now Ray was a little nervous about me. So he called me last night and said, I want to make sure you understand the audience that you're going to be speaking to today, Matt. This is a crowd that likes to laugh. They love humor. And if I were you, I would start off with something really funny just to kind of get them laughing and put them at ease. And then he paused for a minute and he said, because if you don't, they can turn on you pretty quick. We've had speakers that have gone running off the stage before crying because the crowd turned on them and got so hostile. Well, I didn't want to let anybody down, so I immediately got on my phone and started Googling world's funniest jokes. And after an hour of searching, I found one that was hilarious. It was perfect. Said it was so funny, it was guaranteed to make the hair fall right out of your head. But I got here this morning and started looking around the room and saw there's quite a few of you out there must have already heard it, so I'm not going to tell it again. Something like that, very simple. Yep, Ray's heard it twice. Heck. Some brief connection like that, it takes 30 seconds. It really just gets everybody kind of at ease and laughing. To me, I think that's a great way just to build that rapport. Also in the opening, it's really explain why your message is important. Why should they listen to you? Why should they care about whatever the topic is? And then very briefly, just kind of summarize at a high level what it is that you want to cover, what you expect for them to get out of the presentation on that day. That's it. That's the opening. To me, I think that can be so important because you're setting the tone for that presentation. Now, from there, you jump into the meat of the speech, right? And again, it depends on the type of presentation, how long the presentation is. But for me, my attention span is not the best. And so to me as a speaker, I try to focus on no more than really 3 main nuggets of information, because if you get more than that, it's just hard for people to absorb it. I remember being once in the audience and the speaker got up and he said, we're going to talk about leadership today. And every letter of the word leadership stood for another word to help explain what leadership was about, like L, with listening, and E for enthusiasm. Well, he got to D, and we're like, oh my gosh, he's got 8 more words to go. And so by the time he got to the P, we were clapping that he was finished because it was just too much for our brains to absorb. So, I would say limit the number of points that you want to make and really be creative in how you convey those points. I'm a big guy of telling stories, personal examples, quotes, facts, illustrations, whatever it is. These are the things that you can really be creative to convey these points. You don't have to just read off every stat, every fact, but really try to look at at stories and personal examples, because effective speaking is really effective storytelling. You're trying to connect with that audience. And so as you go through those points, I would encourage you to really be creative. And finally, you got to conclude, right? Conclusion at the end to kind of summarize and review, but most importantly, my hope is for you to inspire them to take some type of action. Maybe it's a powerful story, it's a poem, it's an illustration. Again, some of you that have heard me speak before, you've heard my example about the spoon and the story of my grandmother and how the reflection in the spoon about serving ourselves and serving others. It's something that people remember, they can see it. Again, it's heartfelt, but it's a way that can inspire them that we all need to go out and serve the people around us. Life is about serving and giving. It's not about just trying to accomplish what we want to accomplish. So that, I think, people will really remember your conclusion. It's the takeaway. It's the inspiration they feel when the presentation's done. And I like this stat at the bottom. I heard this years and years ago, but it's so true. You know, you want to tell the audience what you're going to tell them. You want to tell them, and then you tell them what you told them. And I think that's a kind of a simple way to make sure that you're going to kick it off, you're going to tell them, and then kind of summarize what you told them just to make sure that they got the message through. So this part of the presentation, normally when I do these half-day training sessions, is the most favorite for me because it's the interactive piece. We basically go through all of the things that I think make for a really good, powerful delivery. And I have a box of all these different topics, and it's everything from what would you do if you won $1 million to who is your all-time favorite singer to you know, what's your most embarrassing moment. And basically, as we go through each of these techniques, I get people up in front of the room, they draw a topic out of the hat, they read it, and they have to stress whatever it is that we're focusing on, gestures or voice or posture, as they tell the story. And again, we can't do that here today, but the bottom line is I really would encourage you to practice some of these techniques that I know Randy's going to share with you, and I'm going to share with you, that we feel are going to make you a more effective presenter. Because sitting through a 2-hour webinar is not going to make you a better speaker if you don't actually incorporate that into your presentation or get out there and practice it. I can't stress it enough. Practice is so very, very important. So the first one you'll see on the screen are gestures. You know, we have these two arms that are attached to us, and when you're up in front of the audience, it can be kind of awkward. Some people don't know what to do with them. They can sit, you know, or cross their arms like the fig leaf position, or they can hold them behind their back, you know, or sometimes gestures can be distracting if somebody's just moving their hands around willy-nilly without any purpose. That can be distracting as well. Gestures in your hands can really help tell the story if they're done properly. And so I just have a couple of descriptive words here on gestures. The first one is a descriptive gesture where you're describing something. Something is very big, it's tall, there are 3 of them. It can help you tell the story, and it helps describe the story or the point that you're trying to make. It can be very effective. The second one, emphatic gestures, really shows some type of emotion. I am so mad, and you got your fists are clenched. Or, you know, you're very sad and you slump down like that. They help tell a story again. They help show that emotion. But again, you're using your hands to help you with that story. Last one, I've got prompting. Like if I'm getting ready to ask a question, I'll raise my hand and say, how many of you in the audience today have ever eaten that Ruth's Chris? And so it's a way that you can try to engage the audience by raising your hand and getting them to raise their hand to kind of help build that connection a little bit. Again, gestures can be very effective, but if they're done poorly, they can detract from the presentation. So again, I would say if you're speaking in general, it's good to kind of rest your hands by your side. Just kind of have them right there handy. When you need to make a gesture, you can. And certainly if you're at a podium, would encourage you not to clench the podium with tight fists or rock the podium back and forth. Just kind of rest your hands gently on the podium. Again, having your hands available when it's time to make some gestures. And so Randy, I'm going to have you come up front of the audience here and draw a topic out of the hat, and let's answer a question and kind of enforce the gesture. That's what I wish we could do now. But Unfortunately, we're on video and we can't do that. But again, practice that. Very important to be able to put that into practice and see if you can be more comfortable using your hands. The second technique on the screen you see is your voice. And again, I think that's so very, very important. When you think about those presenters that do not connect, many times it's because they're very monotone. They have no expression, no emphasis, just very, very even tone. Sometimes you really can't hear them. You want to be able to project all across the room, but at the same time, you don't want to yell at them. You're not screaming at them. So it's kind of a fine line of projecting so that the person in the last row can hear you, but at the same time, you're not screaming. Of course, microphones are very handy when you're in a larger room, but in a smaller room, the goal is to project to the last person, but at the same time, you don't want the person on the front row to feel like that they're being yelled at. Speak slowly and clearly. Now, you've probably noticed I'm from the South and I speak kind of fast. And so for me, that's something I've always struggled with. And I remember back during my FFA days when I would give speeches, at the top of every note card or at the top of every page, I would have in big letters, slow down, printed out, because I knew my tendencies were to speak fast. And so a reminder every time I flipped the page to slow down was very helpful. I know that was one of the questions that someone submitted about how can I go slow or slow down. Sometimes just a general reminder like that can help you. Fluctuation is important to have excitement in your voice, but you don't want to have excitement all the time. It's being able to get high and get low and balance that, and practice breathing. Again, before I give any presentation, I go backstage and I just take a few minutes and just really do that deep breathing. It helps to calm you. The breathing exercises just to, stretch out the lungs and make you feel comfortable. And something else I do just as far as relaxing you is I'll just find a quiet place and close my eyes and just kind of do some light relaxing exercises, rolling your neck and moving your shoulders up and down, just to kind of put you at ease. Taking those deep breaths, and before you walk out in front of that group, it'll help to put you in a better place. And finally, pauses I think can be very effective as well. When you get to a point and you're setting it up ready for that final impact, just to pause, wait 1, 2, 3 seconds and continue. I think the pause can be very effective with your voice as well. So again, energy, enthusiasm, fluctuations are extremely important when it comes to being able to really connect with that audience. Eye contact, of course, is very important. Eye contact varies depending on the size of the group. If you're speaking to 1,000 people, you can't make eye contact with every person in the room. You kind of fix some general places around the room if you're on a big stage. But if you're in a smaller audience, which for most of you probably would be, pick out a few faces in advance and just kind of scan the room methodically, kind of looking at them. I recommend maintaining eye contact for just a couple of seconds with that person and move around. Have you ever been like sitting on the front row and you have a speaker and over a 20-minute speech, they never, ever make eye contact with you? I mean, it's like they're looking around, but they're never looking, and you're like, over here, over here. I mean, it's frustrating to see someone never make eye contact with you. But at the same time, have you ever been on the front row and the speaker is like just staring at you like the whole time? And that gets a little uncomfortable too, because you're looking down and looking around, and every time you look up, they're still staring at you. Your eye contact is important, but be random. And when you're in a very small, intimate room, it's okay to kind of walk towards the person sometimes to make a point and look at them. The eyes are very, very important. Again, if you're at a podium, and even if you have a speech that you don't have memorized, every line or two, just look up if you can, at least to let them know that you're trying to connect with them and interact with them, because I think that's so very important. Our expression, very important. Again, smile. A smile goes such a long way to be able to show that you're happy to be there. If you have just a blank stare expression with no excitement, they are not going to want to listen to you no matter what the topic is. Being able to just smile and use that animation is it makes you connect. It makes you someone that they really want to be able to listen to. And I have down here to practice in a mirror. It's so important to practice that expression, and even those facial warm-ups, they look kind of funny to do in public, but before you get ready to speak, to really kind of exercise your face and get it stretched out so that you can really be able to show those expressions, I think will go a long way towards helping you to connect with your audience. Just a few more here. A big one, eliminating the padding words, the ums, the and I would say that for a majority of people, this is something they probably would really, really want to work on. And it comes down to really the reason that we say is that our mouth is talking faster than our brains are thinking. We get to the end of the thought, and it's our instinct that we just want to keep on talking, right? But we haven't really, our brains haven't caught up yet. So we just are looking for something to fill that dead space. And that's where the come in. And what we have to do is understand the importance of that silent pause. When we get to the end of a thought, if we need to wait for our brain to catch up, just pause. Don't say anything. Slow down, pause, and continue. This takes a lot of practice. And I would be willing to bet that for a lot of people, when they speak, they don't even know that they do these ums. In fact, I've done trainings before where I would record it and play it back to a person, and they had no idea. If you've got a group that you're really trying to work with each other on, you just have these little clippers or clackers that when somebody's practicing, anytime they say an everybody would clack, and it brings you aware of what you're doing if you're someone that really doesn't even know that you're doing it. The best way to really work on this is to seek advice from others, to say, I'm really struggling when I speak. I know I say those padding words. Can you help me? And so it's something that it's probably one of the hardest things to overcome, but it can be done. But it all comes down to just pausing. Silence is not all bad. Just a quick pause is very effective to help you collect your thoughts and continue onward. So those are my tips on advice for overcoming some of those padding words. And then finally, the posture is so important. You want to be able to be confident, to stand strong, to relax. Don't lean on the podium or rock back and forth, or you see the picture there of the young lady slumped over. That is not someone that you want to listen to if you want to be motivated and excited, right? You want someone that's confident. They're proud. They're excited to be there. And so that posture is very, very important. And again, talk to people around you and say, can you help me with this? If I'm up in front of the room and you can tell that my posture is bad or I'm slacking, please help me with that, because having some good mentors to help you with that is going to be extremely important. And finally, body language is so important. Just how you come across, dress appropriately. And that's very important before you speak. Is it going to be a coat and tie crowd, or is it going to be a more casual crowd? There are a few things worse than showing up at an event with a coat and tie and everybody else is in shorts and t-shirts. Well, I guess the only thing worse would be if you show up in shorts and t-shirt and everybody else is wearing a coat and tie. That's pretty embarrassing too. So dress appropriately. And then I love this, the 7-38-55% rule. This is someone that came up with this 50 years ago, talking about communication, right? And they say when you communicate with people, only 7% of communication are the spoken words. Only 7%. 38% of the way people communicate or hear you is the tone of voice. But 55% of effective communication is your body language. It's the way you come across when you're presenting. 55% of the way people hear your communication is the body language. Only 7% is the words that you say. So this is very, very important. Again, when you're talking to a group, never fold your arms like this. It shows that you're closed off, you're not engaging. Don't put hands in pockets, or sometimes we have those fidgets where we're talking and we have our arm like this. We might play with the button a little bit. Try not to do that. That's showing nervousness, and it's showing that you're not engaged. I would encourage you. Now, again, everybody's got a preference. To lose the podium when possible. And again, if you're just starting out, there's comfort in having your notes on a podium and you're standing there. But as you become more experienced, I think most of you would agree you can connect better with the presenter who's not glued to a podium, but someone that can walk the stage or walk around the room a little bit, it helps you to connect better with them. So again, it comes down to having that confidence, having that energy, but being able to just be able to not necessarily stand behind the podium, but to have the freedom to move around and really help to build that connection. Now, unfortunately, again, we're not able to have you come up to the front of the room and draw a topic out of a hat, but it's so important that we really look for ways to put these tips to the test. And so that's my challenge for you when we're all finished here today. If you really want to be a more effective speaker, you're going to have, like all things, you're going to have to practice, practice, practice. So I would say, just if there's a takeaway of everything that I've said to you in the last 30 minutes or so, number one is smile. When you get up in front of a crowd, smile will be so very important. Number two, have energy, enthusiasm. The picture you can see, people are connected when you smile, when you have energy, when your voice has passion in it. People are hanging on every word. They want to hear what comes next. So smile, have energy, have a strong voice tone, making sure your voice just projects that positive exuberance that you have. And finally, four, again, the best way to connect is through stories. Effective speaking is effective storytelling. Just think about your life. And if you're a parent and you've got kids, gosh, I've got 6 kids. I can tell you that there have been speeches that I've done that every single story came from just something that I've experienced as a parent. And if you're talking to a group of parents and you're telling stories about kids, chances are they've had that same experience as well, and they can connect and relate. That's why it's important to understand the audience that you're speaking to, so you can really help to build that connection. But again, stories are so very, very important, and you got to practice. So what I would encourage you to do is find someone that you trust, a friend, a colleague, a coworker, a family member, and say, okay, whenever I'm going to be giving a presentation, here's a feedback checklist that you can print off and give to them, and let them make some notes for you. Maybe you have several folks if you're getting up in front of an audience and speaking, and basically, have them rate you on what you've done. This is a very simple checklist, and you can certainly create your own. But if it's, what's the opening? Did you accomplish the objective with the opening, or the meat of the speech, or the conclusion? The depth of knowledge, the delivery, how did you do connecting with your eye contact and your gestures and your tone, and being able for them to rate you and be able to offer some feedback. Was the audience engaged? How are the materials that you handed out? And then any other feedback or suggestions that they have. To me, I think this is so very important, to solicit that feedback. Again, I've said this 20 times, and I'll say it one more time. You have to practice. You have to constantly work on the things that you need help with, like the ums or maybe your gestures. Solicit that feedback and find people who are going to be willing to help you with that. So that's my 45 minutes here, and certainly at the appropriate time, whether it's now or whether it's later on, I'm certainly more than happy to answer your questions. But again, I want to thank you for joining today. I love personal development, anyone that's willing to invest time to improve at whatever it is. And it's an honor for me to have the opportunity to participate with Randy and Mike and Ray here today and be able to share some of my experiences. I know I've had a chance to interact and work with many of you over the last 2 years, and certainly I hope that our paths can continue to cross. Now that I'm back home farming, I will say that I'm able to continue with my personal speaking. I had to put that on the side for a few years, but my website is lohrleadership.com. It's all my contact information is on there, but certainly if you have questions or things that I can do to help you or work with your group, I hope that you'll keep that in mind, and always happy to be of service. So thank you. Ray, I'll turn things back over to you and let you facilitate from there.
Matt, thanks so much. And what I think we'll do probably is just a couple of questions now, and then we've got more questions coming up for both you and Randy coming up. So just a reminder to the group, go ahead and enter your questions that you may want to have answered by Matt. Matt, glad you're grabbing a little bit of water. That was an important thing too, right? Grab water if you're going to be speaking for any length of time. And
Absolutely.
our first question I'm going to tackle, which is please tell that this is recorded. And someone had joined us a little bit late, and yes, it's being recorded, and you'll be able to find that at the NASCA website. And we'll give that to you at the end of the session today. So yes, we are recording it, and just wanted you to know that. One individual asked if you could go over that 738.55 rule one more time, Matt, just that 738.55.
Absolutely. So it's basic communication, and I can try to slide back here as well. And if not, I can just share. So basically, when you communicate with someone and the way people gather the information that you're sharing, right? Only 7% of the way that communication takes place is by the words that you say, only 7%. 38% is in the tone of your voice. They communicate 38% of that overall communication is the tone, but 55% is your body language. It's how it's so important the way you project it, your posture, your excitement, all of that, your body language. Really, 55% of communication is that. So it's not just the words that you say; it's how you convey it is so very, very important.
Thanks. Just wanted to ask you also, how do you handle a non-reactive audience and a speech to get them engaged? And you use some of those techniques I noticed today, right? You would have had a hat, you would have had topics in that, you would have had the interactive, but just some of your thoughts about how to handle a non-reactive audience.
Oh man, it's tough. And let me tell you, I spent many years doing high school assemblies and middle school assemblies. And so when you're, if you can survive 45 minutes on stage of 1,000 high school kids, and you can speak to anyone because that's a tough audience. But you're right. I mean, you can have all of the techniques in the world, but not every crowd is going to be really, really engaging. So again, I would say, first of all, don't get rattled, because you may have techniques that work for one crowd and may not work for the next. And it's okay. Every crowd's a little different. So you got to stay calm. If you tell a joke or you do an activity and they don't laugh, or they complain a little bit about having to get up out of their seat, it's okay. Stay calm, stay positive, and really, I would say just continue trying the best you can to interact and engage with them. And again, unfortunately, the reality is not every crowd is going to be a home run. And I remember doing a crowd sometimes to some farm groups, and I know for many of you that you'll be speaking to some farm groups. If you're speaking to a group of 75-year-old farmers, chances are they're not going to want to get up out of their seat and move around and do some type of an activity, typically. There's exceptions, of course. So I think part of it is being able to understand the audience that you have. If you're speaking to kids, teenagers, they're going to want to get out of their seat and move around and be social. So part of it's going to be knowing your audience beforehand, and being able to kind of try to interact with the crowd. Again, typically older folks are not going to want to be bouncing around the room, but they want to maybe more sharing one-on-one or interactive. So part of it is being able to just try to identify with the group that you have. But stay calm, don't get rattled. And if you try something that doesn't work, just make a note of it and try to improve or try something different the next time.
Thanks, Matt. And another question, and then we're probably going to go right to Randy and then handle questions together with both you and Randy. This one is particularly directed at you, though. In your role as chief and throughout your career, you've had to deal with some tough questions, whether it was in the legislature or, FFA officer or chief of the Natural Resources Conservation Service. How do you deal with those tough questions, the one that just come from left field and you think, oh my God, I just want to slump away from this and not have to answer it?
Trust me, there have been many times, especially as an elected official, where I just wanted to hide somewhere. So a couple of things, because anytime you're taking questions, you have a strong possibility that you're going to get one that you don't know the answer to. I think first and foremost, don't ever lie, or don't ever bluff, or just kind of think you can snowball your way through, because if you don't know, you don't know, right? So I think it's first and foremost, it's just admit if you don't know it, you don't know it, and say, it's a great question. I appreciate. I know it's an important topic. Unfortunately, I don't know the right answer, but I'm committed to being able to find out and get back with you, and then get the appropriate information, and then make sure you can follow up. So I think first of all, if this were a class I was giving to political candidates, I would probably have a different answer, because sometimes they can, kind of, you're in control, so you can kind of take the question and kind of spin it back around to a talking point that you want to share. This isn't a political campaign training, so I wouldn't really encourage that so much. I think it's just basically, thanking them for the question. Obviously, it's an important topic. You don't know the answer, but you'll do some research and get back to the person.
Thanks, Matt. Stay tuned and stay with us. We're going to have Randy's presentation, then we're going to unleash both of you for questions and answer period. And we thank you so much. So rest a bit. We're going to be back with you in just a bit. There's some excellent questions waiting for you on the other side of Randy's presentation. Our first question is going to be an easy one. So this is to both of you. Just a comment. This was an excellent presentation. So for both of you, and the way that you came about some of our questions that we had from our registration was fabulous. So let's go to what, Randy, this is first couple questions going to be from you. What is the name of your book that you referenced in Leadership is Influence Screen? What is the name of your book?
The mind map, I guess, is that what we're talking about? The book and the mind map? Well, I'm a little embarrassed to talk about my book. It's not about me talking about my book, but the name of the book grew out of doing a presentation many times about what you learn from 9,000 years of farming. And so that's the title of the book, What I Learned from 9,000 Years of Farming.
9,000 years of farming. And
what
they can,
yeah.
Mm-hmm. What I learned from 9,000 years of farming.
Yeah. I sleep in a hyperbaric chamber. I'm really, I'm in my best face today. I'm pretty old, really.
And you're still working on your 9,000 years, right, Matt?
Yeah. I'm not finished yet. Although growing up on a farm will just about finish you off.
Okay. All right. So regarding Randy, one more question for you, and then we're going to switch to both of you. Regarding your advice on choosing words that aren't divisive, how do you vet the language to ensure you're not using trigger words? You mentioned trigger words during your presentation.
Yeah, those, and the classic term for that is dog whistle words. And that's what makes them so deadly. It's like the dog whistle. Most of the people don't even hear that pitch, but there will be a few people that you say just the wrong word, that word means something totally different. So my best recommendation to not get yourself blown up by that one or two people is to think through, and literally when I talk about practicing, I would recommend that you do a webcam of your presentation if it's a major one. And I know that most of your speeches are not in front of 500 people, but just practice and do that presentation. And if you do that and record it, like on Zoom, you have the benefit then of talking to the organizers of the event and say, let me just let you see what I'm saying and tell me if I'm unnecessarily ruffling someone that I don't even know about. So I would, when possible, I would go ahead and vet that against the people on the inside of the organization. And if they're cool with it, then you're pretty safe, because they're going to know where the minefields are. One of the things I talk about is that about the ethnocentricity thing is we are blind to it. We kind of tend to think everybody's like us, and that will get you in trouble, particularly these days. Everybody's not like you. You have to tell the truth, but do it in the way that will not turn them off.
So normally there's somebody that calls you or Matt and says, I want you to present on this or do a keynote or do this presentation. That's the person that you can rely on, or persons you can rely on for that vetting. I've got this joke, or I got this idea, I got this something or other. You can actually run it by them then, huh?
Yeah. Absolutely. And if you've got time in advance, if it's a major speech, ask them, could I talk to some of your people and get some phone numbers, and just tell me some folks that I can It's that using your index finger and tapping them on the shoulder and tell me from your perspective, what are y'all dealing with?
Yeah.
And are there some, I just ask them sometimes, where are the kryptonite minefields that Superman does not want to go or walk delicately? They'll help you.
Right. All right. For both of you, then, the next question comes in. How do you handle detractors that interrupt you during the course of a presentation or public speaking engagement? Matt, let's start with you. How do you handle those detractors?
Well, I would hope that, speaking with adult groups, it's probably pretty rare. I know back to my days of doing middle school assemblies, it was a little more of a challenge. But I would hope, with adults speaking to adults, that you're not going to have examples of that. But certainly it could happen. If you've got someone that's being really disruptive, and maybe I'm doing a workshop where I can kind of work the room. In the past, I would kind of, as you're walking around talking, kind of stand next to that person a little bit, and still speaking to the crowd, but you're next to them. You're letting them know that I'm aware of what you're doing, that I'm kind of standing with you, even putting your hand on their shoulder if they're being really disruptive. So, I mean, I think in dealing with student groups, that might be a little more of a challenge with folks wanting to, show off for their friends and all. And I think sometimes, I mean, that you could even pause and just stop and wait 5 seconds to see if the person stops and then continue on. I mean, if it's really bad, you could walk over, you could even address it. But again, I would hope that's not going to be an issue that most people are going to be facing, but certainly, depending on the topic and the crowd, it's certainly a possibility.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Randy? Yeah.
let me offer a thought about that, because Matt's exactly right, that you've got to deal with whatever you got to deal. There is a formula, and at the risk of sounding like I use formulas, because one of the things I used to teach is customer service and how do you deal with the angry customer. And so there's 3 words: feel, felt, and found. And if you can remember that little, it's easier: feel, felt, and found. And so if someone is so abrupt and rude as to stand up or shout or whatever, one approach is to just stop for a moment and say, excuse me, I can tell that we need to visit more at length. What was your name? And so now they kind of have to self-identify, which they probably are fine with that. And so, well, let me just say, Jim, let's say their name is Jim. I understand how you feel. Long pause. He wasn't expecting that. The audience wasn't expecting that. All of a sudden, you've kind of come across the line on his side just a little bit, because you're saying, I understand how you feel. And then the second word is, and the truth of the matter is, there's been times when I have felt that same way. Wow. Now I've identified, I'm acknowledging, I know how you feel. There's times when I have felt like that. And then here's where you turn it gently. Would that I could turn things as well as Matt Lohr. You turn it and say, let me share with you what I have found. Another long pause. Now you have to be thoughtful enough about how you're going to make that next line. But as Matt would say, you've kind of turned the subject just a little bit. So now you're speaking, and I have found that when you look at these issues a little more and go a little more in depth, that there are more than one side to this. And I would love to speak with you later after the session. And I appreciate you bringing it to my attention. Boom, I'm back into the speech. And it just kind of takes the wind out of their sail a little bit. And some of you who've been in sales and customer service recognize that feel, felt, and found will help you deal with some of those angry people.
Matt, I bet you've experienced that, haven't you? I mean, I can almost feel that question on a farm bill program coming at you like a zinger, right? And you have, on my farm. Go ahead, Matt. Yeah, speak to that.
You're exactly right. I mean, there will be people, especially when you're rolling out a new program or you're trying to educate folks about a change that's taken place. Speaking with employees about a change that the administration has made. Sometimes you get folks that are not necessarily in favor. I think Randy's right. Being able to help them understand that you understand that their issue, you understand, you put yourself in their shoes, and then being able to say, let's talk, let's follow up, or kind of give your personal experience on that. So I think that's a great experience. And certainly back in my old political days, I remember I remember many times having folks be able to want to steal the show and express their displeasure with some piece of legislation or something going on. So definitely those distractions can get you rattled. I think the final thing I would say is really just try to stay calm and not let it knock you off your game, because it's really easy in those situations to just get rattled and lose your concentration. But like Randy said, being able to come back around then and then be able just to continue moving ahead, it's going to take some practice, but certainly good advice.
It does.
Yeah. Excellent. Excellent. Thanks so much, guys. Now, the next question then is, if for no reason your nerves get the best of you and your voice cracks or you lose your breath, do you have any tips to get back on track? And let's start with you, Matt. You just all of a sudden your nerves get the best of you. You maybe have a little bit of anxiety pang or something, and you got to get back on, back on your game. Any tips?
Yeah, and it can happen. I mean, certainly if you've got a joke that you're delivering and it just bombs, I mean, those things can kind of start to rattle you a little bit. For one, and you mentioned earlier, for me, it's good to always have a glass of water. I think if you just pause, take a drink of water, just kind of calm yourself. Because I know for me, if I ever get rattled, the first thing you feel is you get that dry mouth sitting in, and then it just kind of snowballs. So having a glass of water. But I think sometimes just being able to there's nothing wrong with just taking a breath and pausing and kind of collecting yourself, take that drink of water, and then continue. The more you speak and get up in front of a group, I promise you, the easier it's going to be. The hardest speech is always the first time you do it. And so I think the more experience and the more practice you have, those situations hopefully will happen less frequently. But yeah, just pausing, catching your breath, drink of water, I think are some good tips.
Randy, add to that?
What he said, that's really good. Sometimes if you take that drink of water, you can just look and say, whoever made that knew what they were doing. And it just kind of helps the audience. The audience really loves you, really. If nothing else, they feel empathetic or sympathetic toward you. And the overwhelming majority of people are going to be supportive of someone. And I would also say it's a little bit like, when you go to the circus and people are watching the person on the high wire act, and there's no net underneath there, the person up there doing the walking, they give every manifestation of being calm and what have you. But if the person up there begins to get real nervous and starts dropping their balance pole or whatever, all of a sudden the audience just they absorb that nervousness, and then they get nervous for you, and then you're nervous because now they're nervous for you. So that's right. It's got to come from inside you that you're going to have that calm exterior. And again, he's right. The more you practice, the more you do this, the more you'll surprise yourself that you sound and look better than you thought you did. And you won't believe that until you go back and watch the videotape. So do that webcam practice, do your speech right. Whether it's a PC or a Mac, you can look right in there and record if you're doing slides and record yourself. And what a deal. And then you can play it back and see what it looks like, and you'll get better and better.
Thanks, guys. I was asked, in just the few presentations I give, Ray, what do you do for your nerves? I said, man, if I don't have a little bit of nervousness, right, then I'm not on my game. So a little bit of nervousness, even with the professionals, right? You got to have a little anxiety, a little bit, worrying about stuff, right, to hit that podium and really deliver the best presentation and speech. So what about this? This is a key takeaways for conveying a message in this virtual format. And I know both of you are just getting started with this, as you've mentioned that to the audience already. Where should you focus to engage a virtual audience? What are your early thoughts on that as you're just getting kicked over to this new way of doing business.
Matt, you want to go first?
Well, so a little more clarification when you say where do you focus, like as far as the content of the presentation, or what specifically you think you're getting?
Yeah, the question was, where should you focus to engage a virtual audience?
Yeah.
Where should you?
Well, clearly I'm not very good at it because I want to just reach out to the audience, to bring them in, and I can't. So I'm still learning this virtual game, and maybe I think Randy's had some more experience than I have, but let me just say it's tough because you love the laughter and just there's just a connection you have with your audience when you're in front of the room, and it's hard. And so I think for me, we're all still learning. I think the more you do it again, the more comfort you'll have. But gosh, I mean, I'm certainly not the expert to be giving advice on connecting with an audience through these virtual meetings because I'm still figuring it out myself. But
yeah. Randy, any thoughts as you start to work this a little bit?
Yeah, the first thing I do, Ray, is hire you because you're the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain, and you have put it all together. And kudos to Mike for hiring you. Second thing is you're always looking for that way to get them involved, and it is tougher in a virtual audience. So you do have to find ways to kind of pull them in. You notice one of the things that I did right off is I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. And that's always a good thing, is to ask them a question, even if it's rhetorical, or ask them to do something. And of course, the dime helped me in a lot of different ways because it made me get people a little, you had to dig into your pocket a little bit if you got a coin out. And I'll just give you another thing that just came to me last night. I was thinking about it. But you really want to kinesthetically involve them if you can. And one of the ways you can do that is just what I just did. Wherever you are, let me just ask you to do this. Take your hands and clasp them together like that. You can imagine asking an audience to do this. You can do this virtually. Just clasp your hands. Now look down at your hands and see which thumb is on top. Is it your left thumb or your right thumb? And a lot of times I'll say, okay, raise your hand with your left thumb, your right thumb, whatever. And I said, now take your hands apart, and this time interlace your fingers back, but this time put the other thumb on top. Do the other interlace like that. And you can just hear the sound, even through a virtual screen, people saying, that's not the right way to do it, even though the audience is split about half and half as to whether or not they're right thumb on top or left thumb on top. And I segue out of that by saying something like this. You know what? There are a few things that are hardwired into you. You do not learn how to bring your hands together by watching your parents or watching your favorite teacher. You just didn't. You came born with a right way to feel whether it's your right thumb on top or your left thumb on top. And when you do it the other way, you say, that's just completely wrong. And so, and then you can kind of pull them in and say, we all have some predispositions of some things. But the thing I want to talk with you about, and you say all of a sudden we've just gone to something that is more ambidextrous in their mind, you have to make your thoughts about some of these things. So that's just a little trick.
That's outstanding. I'm going to go to one more question, give you a chance for just any final things that you wanted to make sure that the group knew. Then I get to turn to Mike. So that's our few-minute rundown here. The question, and it really seems appropriate, it's regarding evaluating today's presentation. And before you answer, what will happen is that you'll get an opportunity to evaluate. Take that opportunity to evaluate. That will send me an email of what went well. You know, and I've usually had just 3 parts to an evaluation. One is what went well, and you would repeat it again. What didn't go so well, and what would you do about what didn't go so well? And so what would you recommend? So what went well, what didn't go so well, and what would you recommend? The fourth question that I use from time to time in evaluation is, was it worth your time? which is really, really, a loaded question, right? I mean, it's one question that, gets right to it. Yep or nope, so that's a 4-question evaluation. And when you get the go-to webinar evaluation thing, send Ray something, do that. Take those 4 items. What went well, must repeat, what didn't go so well, how would you change it, and then finally, was it worth your time? Now, Randy, and you pressed on that, Randy, so I'm going to go to you, and Matt, I'll follow up with you. Go ahead. The evaluations.
Oh, I didn't know I pressed on anything, but I will add
Model,
again.
the fourth letter in model is evaluate.
Oh man, if I could have just remembered that.
I was listening.
Let me pick that figure. Well, I'm still interested in trying to help those folks more so than them helping me, although I do need your help. It really helps me if you give me 3 things that will make this presentation better. The other thing that I might be able to help them again is just if you email me, mail, M-A-I-L, at randyfrazier.com. I have a kind of pre-sorted set of attachments that I will send to you. I won't just send it to one place and everybody kind of feed off if they want to. If you care enough about that, just email me, mail at randyfrazier.com. And it may take me a day and a half, but I will email you back and give you those attachments, those links to other videos that are out there that do an excellent job. So yeah, evaluation is, if anything, I'm long in the tooth on that. You've got to have people tell you what needs to be fixed because you can't see it yourself.
Well, and Matt, you also pressed on this, and you gave us a format, right? Especially from those that you trust. So Matt, please, how would you evaluate?
What I'd say 2 things. One, first of all, this is the first time that I've done something like this virtually, and it looks like, unfortunately, COVID's going to be around for a while, so there's probably going to be more and more of these types of programs. So I would appreciate feedback because, as Randy said, I want to grow as a presenter and communicator. So if there are things that you think could make it better, please share that. But for you, the audience, again, it's just so important to make sure that you're growing and being able to solicit that feedback from friends or strangers. I mean, just being able to reach out to people you trust and really who are interested in seeing you improve is so very important. And Randy touched on it. I mean, you're not going to get better unless you're constantly seeking feedback. And sometimes it's not always the easiest to hear. We want to hear we're the greatest thing since sliced bread. But if you really want to get better, you have to look for ways to get that feedback. So would certainly encourage all of you in your growth to look for those opportunities.
Amen.
That's excellent. So for both of you, usually when we get on the airplane and go back home, or we're headed back to the airport, we think, dang, I wish I would have told them this, whatever that is, right? It's like that one thing that you just, oh my gosh, I just wish I would have told them. Randy, let's start with you. Did you have one of those pangs about, man, I just needed to say this and I forgot to, or didn't include it in your presentation, or whatever it might be?
The words of Baba Dion, and that's why I ended with that. Like all the rest of you who are in conservation, what really got me into this was the big paycheck, the easy hours, hardly any work to do. Yeah, right. What got you into this is because you care about the land, and the land does not vote. And so it's fundamentally important, and I suspect this is just as true for Matt. It's fundamentally important for us that we see you become the best thought leaders that there can be in any agency, because you speak literally for what we call America and the world.
Thanks so much.
Last thing I'll say to that, really nothing that I didn't share, but just to reiterate again, and Randy alluded to this too, that each of you have an individual story to tell. And as a legislator, former legislator, I remember it's the stories that constituents share that will impact the decisions of us going forward with potential legislation. So each of you engaged in conservation have a story. So now it's up to you to look for ways to better communicate that story to the public, to your officials, to those who can, the policy makers and changers is so important. So just have that passion, have that desire, and carry your story forward. And hopefully the training today can help you a little bit in how to best communicate that message for the most impactful outcomes.
Yes.
Well, I have a half a dozen worth of notebook pages of notes here from your two presentations, folks, and it would just so from a heartfelt thanks for answering the call to come to us today and do this webinar for our conservation folks. With that, then, I get to turn it over for closing comments from our Executive Director of NASCA, Mike Brown. Mike?
Thanks, Ray. And you know, we've all sat through presentations in life where at the end of the presentation you go, well, there's an hour of my life I'll never get back. And today's webinar was just the opposite. You know, we get so few of these real cherry moments, and guys, I can't thank you enough. You knocked it out of the park. In fact, through this 2-hour period, I only heard one thing that I disagreed with, and Randy, that was from one of the quotes you used, and the second line of that quote was, and we only love what we understand. And many of the folks out there know my wife Mary, and our love is really special. It's deep, it's unwavering, and there's never a moment that I don't love her with all of my heart. But there are many moments that I just don't quite understand. Okay. Having said that, I think it's important that all of us on today's webinar are reminded that I'm going to go back 80 years. A guy named Hugh Hammond Bennett got a lot of this started, and he did that not because he was the world's greatest soil scientist. Certainly, he was skilled, but his real gift was he was a showman, and he was a speaker and a storyteller, and he knew how to get a message across. And in the last 80 years, we've done tremendous work on the landscape, and no one can question that. Where we have not done a good enough job is explaining the importance of that work. And these two gentlemen today are absolute professionals. Hopefully you can take what they shared with us today and use that to convey that message on a daily basis. And keep in mind, shameless endorsement here, guys, but these are professional speakers. They're both professional guns for hire. If you've got a venue where you really need to get a message across and you need a professional, I hope you don't mind me saying it, guys, they are available. So I will end things with that, Ray, and as always, I can't thank Ray Ledgerwood, our moderator, enough. Fantastic job as always. Ray, I'll turn it back to you. Guys, thanks again.
Thanks, Mike. And just for those kudos, comments, or questions about where to get Randy and Matt's information, you could email Mike Brown there at the email address or phone call, or my phone number and phone call would be fine too. Happy to put that up on the screen also. So with that, then I'm going to do something unprecedented. I'm going to unleash everybody. I'm going to unmute everybody so they can give you a big old round of applause. Let's see if this will work here. So if you're muted out there, I want to give these guys a big old round of applause. Here we go. And we'll see if I can unmute all of you. Here it goes. All right, ready, set, work. Yay. All right, excellent. All right, that'll be the end of our webinar today. We were about 11 minutes over time, but I think it was well worth every minute. Folks, thanks so much for joining us today, and we'll see you down the road. Thanks again.
Thanks.